I met with a friend a few months ago, and he told me a little bit about his background, how he started out, his childhood, how he was raised, a little bit about his young adult life. And it just really impressed me to hear about his story and how he came from not a great situation, but he's done so much in life. He's been successful in business. He's an entrepreneur. He's been successful with his family. He's done a lot of great things. And I wanted him to share his story and his experiences because I think Glen has a real powerful story. So let's hear from him. Let's hear about his story.
I'm Glen. I was born in Vancouver, Washington, and as I got a little older, we moved out to Yakult and grew up out in Yakult. My parents had 10 kids, so I'm one of 10 kids. My mom was kind of more laxed and she was kind of checked out for most of my childhood. So we just were homeschooled, but we didn't really have any rules or anything, so we didn't have any governing people really checking on us. So we just kind of roamed around and just kind of did what we wanted to do. My dad was very strict, like I said. Growing up, if we did anything, we'd get beat. And I can remember one time throwing my football up on the roof, and I would throw it up and it would roll back down and I would catch it. And my brother was around the side of the house, and he was hitting rocks with a tennis racket. And my dad was taking a nap. And so he hit a rock through my dad's window, and my brother took off running. And here I am throwing the football up on the roof, catching it. And my dad runs around and grabs me and just drags me to his room and starts beating me, and I don't even know what's going on. So that's kind of like no nonsense, kind of authoritative. If you do anything wrong, you're gonna get beat. My dad would get mad and he would hit my mom too. And so I finally got to a point where I was starting to get a little stronger. And anytime I would stand up for my mom, my dad would hit me. Or anytime I would stand up for my mom, my dad would either hit me or he would kick me out. And so I spent a lot of times kind of bouncing from different people's house. Like I would go to the pastor's house. I stayed with the pastor for a couple weeks here and there. Stayed with friends and family for a couple weeks here and there. Stayed with my grandparents sometimes. But anytime my dad felt threatened by me standing up for my mom, he'd kick me out. And at age 14, I was living in a park in this hollow tree. My dad went to hit my mom, and he punched. My mom moved and closed the door, and went to punch her and broke his hand. It was kind of a ironic situation where he just he got what was coming to him, and I don't know if I laughed or something, but I got kicked out for that one too. And so on that time, I actually went and I was staying in a shed, and my brother wanted to come with me, so he came, and he was 3 years younger than me. He would just come hang out with me sometimes and like run away with me, or not really run away because I got kicked out, but he would run away. And so we were staying in the shed at this house that was for sale. And one day we came back about a week into staying there, and the police were there, and they showed up, and the shed was locked with all our stuff in it, like our sleeping bag and my backpack with a couple pieces of clothing. And they brought us home, and as soon as they brought us home, the police officer left, and my dad said, "What are you doing here?" And he kicked us back out. Then we went and stayed in an abandoned house, and we stayed in the attic of an abandoned house for probably about a month or so. I was kind of feeling like when I was out on the streets, it was just, I hated it. I mean, I didn't have a place to lay my head every night. I was always like trying to figure out, where I would get my next meal. I would go to AM/PM sometimes, and I would wait at the end of the night, and they would get ready to throw their food out, and I would get their food. So it was like, it's one of those things where I would have rather been at home, but not having really, like, with my dad and I conflicting. I didn't want him hitting my mom or my siblings, and so I would always stand up for them. And so it was like I couldn't be at home. By the time I got to my junior year, I was working and I was making money, and I didn't think I needed high school, so I actually dropped out. dropped out for a year, was working, doing all those things. Then I decided I wanted to get my high school diploma. So I went back to school and I actually graduated on time after missing a whole year of school. I tested out of a couple classes to get credits, and then my senior year is actually when I met my wife. We met in an English class. Her parents were so involved that it was kind of nice, and I actually started working for her dad for 7 years. And it really taught me the work ethic and how to work hard, because I was always a hard worker and a good worker, but I'd never really stuck with anything for a long period of time. So working those 7 years with her dad was really beneficial in my just, I guess, the discipline and the discipline of working hard. And so I did that for a while, and I realized that wasn't what I wanted. I kind of wanted to do my own thing. So I went back to school, and I got licensed to be a massage therapist. In 2009, I started my own massage therapy business. I quit. I had 2 jobs at the time. I was working as a massage therapist in a chiropractor's office, and I was working at Costco full time. So I was working about 60, 70 hours a week. And I had 2 small children, and I was debating whether to go to chiropractic school or start my own business. And so I started my own business, and that started doing really well. And with that, it just made me want to grow. And I got to a point where I couldn't handle all the patients that were coming in to see me. So then I hired another massage therapist. And that massage therapist was doing well, but then I got to a point where I actually needed more help. So then I brought on another massage therapist. And then it got to a point where I was still struggling to keep up on demand, and just running into not having enough time in the day. So I hired an office manager. And so the office manager was doing the office managing and then also doing some billing stuff. And then we ended up even hiring a billing person, plus the office manager, another massage therapist, and an acupuncturist. So my office started growing. It took me about 3 years of just pushing and pushing and pushing. And I did so much free work in the first 3 years. It's just ridiculous. But it got me to the point where once I finally hit that spot, it was awesome. And so about 3 years in is when I started becoming successful. I was starting to stay busy all the time. And that's when I was like, okay, how do I take this to the next level? That's when I started going to a lot more business groups. I started working with a business coach, which was really beneficial for me. And in doing that, it just kind of propelled my business to like the next level. At one point, I went to Nordstrom's and I bought a whole new outfit at Nordstrom's because somebody told me that you dress the part you want. And so I did that, and I was actually really surprised. My business actually grew in that point where I actually just dressed nicer. It was the funniest thing. It was just something simple as dressing nicer. And so doing that, that was the point where I started going into doctors' offices and referring my services to these doctors. And that generated a bunch of business. And I wouldn't have had that confidence not doing that just simple step of dressing the part you want. Yeah, one thing that's been really big on me is just studying how successful people become successful. For me, I didn't know anything about success. My life was a failure. Growing up, it was like, I'm just trying to survive. And going from that survival mode to how do I get to the next level? How do I grow? It was like, I just kept on looking at people that were just a little bit further ahead of them than I was, and just stick with them and find out how do they become successful. And I met all these other business people. I met these people that were successful in business. And from that, I learned they would talk about certain things and I would write them down. And they're saying, okay, well, there's this book here. Have you read this book? Think and Grow Rich was one of the books that somebody was talking about. And so I was like, well, I don't even know what that is. And so I went and I got it. Currently, I'm reading James Clear book, Atomic Habits. And so I'm always just getting new books. Brian Tracy were some of the books that I was reading, some of his books, and John Maxwell. Anything I can get my hands on. I heard somewhere that An average manager reads like 7 books a year. I think that's what it was, but they don't read a whole lot. And then the average employee reads like less than a book a year. And so I was thinking, okay, well, if a manager is reading more than that, I'm like, I need to be reading more. Reading about successful people, reading anything when you hear people talking about something that was successful in their life and they found successful, that's the type of stuff that I look for. So like with the James Clear book, The Atomic Habits, a guy that I know that is pretty successful, he does some kind of computer work, and he was talking about it. He said it was a really good book, and he reads over 20 books a year. And so I was like, I gotta have it. So that day I went and I ordered it on Amazon, and I had it the next day and I started reading it. So I asked what successful people read. Every time I would turn around, I was doing one more thing and just adding. I would do something until I got good at it. And once I got good at it, I would just add something else. And so it was just a lot of fun growing this business and growing my idea in my head of what I wanted it to look like. It's kind of funny and sad at the same time. Some of my mentors have let me down as I've found out years later. Like one of my mentors, John, he, big prominent pastor, and now he's in prison. I think it's easy to look up to people and to put these people on pedestals and see them as like perfect and like not having any flaws, but everybody's got flaws, everybody's got problems, everybody's got things that they're struggling with. And like on the outside, it looks nice and looks great. One of my business coaches, he was trying to get to a point where he was making $1 billion, or where his net worth was $1 billion. And now he's getting investigated by the SEC for fraud. So I look at these guys that are very successful and up at the top of their game, and I realize they're just human. They're just like me. I mean, they might have had a little bit better upbringing. They might have had a little bit more help, but they're just like me. They have problems that they're dealing with that maybe the outside world doesn't see. So I guess I've kind of learned that the closer you get to somebody, the more you really find out who they are. And sometimes you're not going to like who they are. And just because they're successful doesn't mean that they're successful. Like say they're successful in business doesn't mean they're successful in life. Like a lot of times most of the times I look at people, I say, like even though I'm not as successful as them, I like my life better. I'd rather have what I have, a healthy relationship with my wife and 3 lovely kids. And I think that it's important to not focus on somebody else's fame and glory, and to just kind of make your own path. It makes me realize that, even though I had a screwed up childhood, even though I have like problems of my own, as long as I work hard and keep on pushing, then I can be successful, and I don't need to try to be somebody else or try to, follow somebody else's footsteps. I can kind of make my own path. And I think that's going to be key for me, is just try to be the best me.
For other great videos and resources, visit lifesurgeacademy.com. Don't forget to like this video if you got something out of it, and subscribe to this channel.